All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham Rakakudash. I want to give double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well in grace and peace, to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. This is your fellow servant, Rakoya from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you with another impromptu lesson. And just striking while the iron's hot. You know, I just had a few things on my spirit as I'm currently in transit. And, you know, I wanted to bring this exhortation to you elect. Oh, this is edifying unto you, especially the men, you know, to get outside sometimes. You know, get outside and allow the Lord to direct your steps. You know, the Israelite man wasn't designed to be cooped up in the house all day. All right. By nature, the Israelite man is very active. The Lord created us to be a very active people. All right. Tending to the land, the livestock, the cattle, the family, the glorification of the Lord and what comes with that office. All right. The Lord designed us to be a very active people. All right. Which has its benefits. All right. Not only for the body, all right, but for the mind and the spirit. All right, it keeps our minds going. It keeps us constantly thinking, you know, and constantly dwelling on the Lord. It keeps us constantly filtering our lives through the scriptures and practicing an active state of discernment, you know, and critical thinking. And it also has its benefits when it comes to the spirit as well. Because a lot of times when Jake be in the funk, you know, it's because you've been cooped up in the house all day. You know, speaking for myself first and foremost. You know, a lot of times when Jake find himself in a stump, you know, in the spirit, it's because you've been cooped up for way too long. You know, you haven't allowed the spirit to flow. You know, you haven't allowed the Lord to work through you. You know, you need to get outside, you know, and allow the Lord to direct your steps. And I'm not saying to put yourself in a bad predicament. You know, now so more than ever, we need to be circumspect wherever we're at. All right. But getting outside may just entail going for a walk around the block, you know, or going to the lake, you know, being around a body of water, you know, letting the spirit flow, you know, going to the park, reading a couple of scriptures, dwelling on those scriptures, you know, meditating on the Lord, allowing the Lord to work through you. You know, speaking for myself first and foremost, it works for me. You know, I've noticed it works for me, especially when around bodies of water. You know, the Lord allows me, if the Lord allows, you know, I'll take myself, or, you know, to the lake or, you know, to the ocean, you know, and read, you know, meditate on the Lord. And a lot of times that spiritual funk is lifted, you know, an inspiration for a lesson comes, you know, or inspiration, you know, for something pertaining to spirit, it arises, you know, and it gets you out that spiritual funk, man. You know, being active has its spiritual and mental benefits, especially for the Israelite man. There's a reason why Esau keeps our day and our lives so tied up and busy, you know, so that we're not able, you know, the average man, you know, because we have been lifted from the yoke of this world and placed under the yoke of Yahushua. But for the average Israelite man, you know, Esau keeps them so busy to where they have no time to dwell on the Lord. You know, they have no other choice but to be in a spiritual and mental funk. You know, they're focused on, you know, the affairs of this life, the cares of this life, and the carrot that Esau is constantly dangling in front of them. You know, they have no time for spiritual or mental cultivation. You know, they're inside all the time, watching movies and on Netflix playing the game, you know, dwelling in virtual reality, you know, and learning how to discern in Esau's manner, you know, not the Lord's. And that's not how the Lord designed us, man. The Lord designed us to be active, which it all has its balance. You know, you have to find the balance for yourself. But a lot of the times, you know, getting outside can be mentally and spiritually beneficial. You know, mentally and spiritually beneficial. It's all a part of trying your spirit, ultimately. You know, which I want to grab here in Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus 37 and verse 27. It says, "My son, prove thy soul in thy life, and see what is evil for it, and give not that unto it. For all things are profitable to men. For not all things," it says, "for all things are not profitable for all men, Salaki. Neither have every soul pleasure in everything." I'm trying to read and drive at the same time. All right, but I'm going to read it again. Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus 37 and verse 27. It says, "My son, prove thy soul in thy life, and see what is evil for it, and give not that unto it. For all things are not profitable for all men. Neither hath every soul pleasure in everything." And it's all a part of self-examination, improving your soul, to see what is good unto it. And just speaking for myself first and foremost, and for any of you, I can, who may benefit from it as a result. Getting outside can have its spiritual and mental benefits. To help you get out of that spiritual funk, because we're not meant to be cooped up in the house all day. We're not meant to be living life through the television. Not meant to be gaining an experience and discernment through the television, man. It's just part of this fucked up world we're in, man. Where Jake is subject to that. It's a lot of times because Jake don't have the resources, and really it don't take money to get outside. You just have to go outside and go for a walk. Allow the Lord to direct your steps. You just meditate on the Lord, man. A lot of times the beauty of the Lord will allow, the beauty to shine forth in this ugly world. As a testament to his authority over this world, man. And it can be very inspiring. It can be very inspiring. I tried to do this as a live stream, but where I'm at, I'm in the sticks. So the connection is all over the place, man. But I'm gonna read it again. Sirach 37 and 27. It says, "My son, prove thy soul in thy life, and see what is evil for it, and give not that unto it." All right. And then I'm proving, there are certain things that are beneficial for our spirits and certain things that aren't. You have some, it says, "For all things are not profitable for all men." Some brothers, for some brothers, certain things are beneficial, that won't be for other brothers. It's all a part of proving yourself, proving your own soul, and seeing what draws you closer to the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, man. And getting active, is a very, could be, one of the ways to draw closer to the Lord, man. But just want to put that quick exhortation out. Trying to multitask and drive through the city and shit. These people are crazy. You got to throw up prayers before you get on the road, man. But I just wanted to bring this exhortations through the spirit, man. Lord, when this is edifying unto you elect, get outside sometimes, man. Allow the Lord to direct your steps. Tap back into that ancient spirit. The spirit that was in our forefathers. It kept them sharp. It kept them, in a constant state of glorifying the Lord. It kept them in a constant state of marvel when it comes to the Lord. There's many beautiful works that the Lord has taken place, even in the midst of this present evil world. A lot of the Lord's glory, a lot of the Lord's beauty can be seen outside, even amongst certain of these people. The glory of prophecy can be seen. The minds of these people. There's people watching these, these Babylonians, watching how through these niggas are, man. As a product of prophecy. It's beautiful in itself. Watching how the animals conduct themselves, in their, little world. How they move according to the spirit. You know, the bird, you know, is a very fascinating creature that the Lord has created. You know, if you notice, a bird, you know, barely flaps its wings. It's a true, you know, living embodiment of faith. You know, a creature of faith. You know, they very rarely, you know, flap their wings. They go with the wind. You know, they go wherever the Lord take them. You know, they're a good example of faith. The squirrel, you know, the squirrel is a perfect example of faith. You know, the scriptures speak about how the animals, you know, that the Lord has created teach many lessons. You know, roughly paraphrasing. There's a lot that we can learn from the Lord's creation. You just sit back and you know, and meditate on it, man. You know, but with that being said, that's all I had, Lord, and edifying unto you elect. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakakwadash, and the honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. Shalom. Stay up.